Today, I am thrilled to welcome a special guest to the Bossing Up Overcoming OCD show. She is the podcast host of The High Ticket Woman. She's also a public speaker, and just such a pleasure to talk with Miss Debbie Caudle. And she brings insightful conversations and challenges relationship topics with both wisdom and practical guidance. So I've known Debbie for a little while now, and I even guested on her show. I had the privilege of doing that and speaking to her audience. So I'm more than excited to have you all hear about Debbie's expertise and how she likes to challenge the common conventional beliefs around relationships, especially when it comes to our faith. So, Debbie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Erin. This is a pleasure. It's always
Yes.
exciting to guest on someone else's podcast for a change, I gotta say.
Wonderful. Well, I do feel very honored to have you here. And, the other thing I wanted to mention is you offer therapy,
Yeah,
plus
yeah,
you're a coach, you've got a
yeah,
course, you're doing the public speaking, you're
yeah.
hosting your own podcast. You got a lot going on.
I got a lot going on. Sometimes I am not sure when I find time to sleep, to be honest, but no, it's all good.
Yes.
It all came together in pieces, right? So I created my first course, then I wrote my book, then I created my
Book.
second course, and then I added the podcast. So it's just sort of been layer on layer on layer on layer on layer. So yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, you seem like a natural helper. And so the
Yeah.
more ways you can try to reach someone to help them, it seems like that's what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I think that's why most people get into therapy, right? They want to help people. So yeah, I think at the core of who I am, I just want to be able to make a difference in people's lives to the best of my ability. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's why I do what I do.
Yes. And what's the name of your book?
The book and the first course are named the same, The Path Less Traveled. And the subtitle of that is Living with Divine Intention in a Secular World. And
Wow.
I wrote it for women. It's written for women. Although I have gotten feedback from men who've written it who say to me, this is just as relevant to men. But yeah, I did design it specifically for women.
Okay. So you've had some men read it and they feel like it resonates.
Yeah. Well, my husband, before we were married, actually was my editor and he edited the content. And so he was the first man to tell me. But I felt like he was a little biased. And
Uh-huh.
then I and then I had a minister in my church actually just decide out of the blue to buy it and read it. And then I had my coach out of the blue. I didn't know he was going to do this, my business coach. Um, Actually, I've had a couple male business coaches buy it and read it, and they both loved it. So, yeah, there's something in there for men too. And
Hmm.
that book was born out of my own, like it tells a little bit of my own journey, my own story through my first marriage and my divorce, because, I'm trying to speak to women who are at a very specific point in their lives where life hasn't turned out the way they wanted it to. And that's why I called it the path less traveled.
Yeah.
It's all about this metaphor of coming to this crossroads in your life and you can continue down the same familiar path, right, of making the same choices or living up the consequences of the choices of the people you surround yourself with.
Uh-huh.
And that's a very familiar path. I don't like the term comfort zone because it's not always a comfortable path that we're on.
Oh,
Um,
good point.
yeah, but it's familiar. So it's painful. We keep suffering, the mistakes that we make and the mistakes of others. But that suffering is something that we've lived out enough that familiarity can make it really hard to get off of that path.
Yeah, so essentially you help women who find themselves maybe in a broken relationship or they're in a place in their life where they didn't expect to be.
Yeah, which I honestly think is most women in one degree or another. And it doesn't have to be a broken, like, divorce, broken relationship in that way. But
Okay.
I think women get to be 30 something. That seems to sort of be like the magical number, 30 something, and they just sort of wake up to this reality that life hasn't turned out in every single way the way they dreamt it would. when they
Mm-hmm.
were little girls, going into teenagehood, going into young adulthood. And there might be a lot of reasons for that. Maybe it's their marriage, maybe it's dissatisfaction with life in general, maybe they are raising young children and they gave up a career for that, or whatever it is. There's that sort of that discontent that begins to sort of, that seed is planted and it's watered
Yes.
and fertilized over time, and then it sort of blossoms into resentment, and that resentment spills over and it begins to impact these relationships, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with God, our relationship with our husband, and so on and so forth. And so I'm speaking to that woman who recognizes that she feels that way. She may not know what to do about it right now, but she is at that crossroads because once she has that awareness, she
Yes.
can take a different path.
Yes. Okay. And so part of your support is helping her find that new path.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's all about taking personal responsibility for the life that you want to have. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know I was getting divorced at the time that I created this course, but my first husband and I were actually on a church sponsored project in the Middle East. We were in Jordan, and that is where we
Oh.
separated. But
Oh.
I was writing that course while I was in Jordan. I had reached out to a number of women who had worked with me prior to us leaving, told them I was doing this pilot program. Do you want to jump into this? I'll just charge you like $100 each to, come along with me. But
Mm-hmm.
just know that I'm writing it as we go. And they said, yeah. So I had like 6, 7, 8 women do this. And
Nice.
each month I would come up with a new chapter. And it was all just written at the time, right? It's morphed now into video and it's all online and it has a very different look and feel to it now. But at the time, it was just, my sort of rough draft. And I had no idea that because when I had come to that crossroads moment myself about 3 years earlier, when my marriage was really, really struggling, and I started to have panic attacks. I talk about this in the book. Out of
Mm-hmm.
the blue. I mean, I had worked with people for years who had panic attacks, but I had never experienced one myself. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to experience these panic attacks. And I just started to have a problem with my back. And I had to really cut back on the number of clients I was seeing. It was really a stressful time,
Yeah, it was really
but
impacting you.
it was really impacting me. And I came to a point where I realized you have to stop blaming your circumstances, Debbie. You got to start practicing what you preach, and you got to start taking responsibility for what's going on and why you're so unhappy. So I started making very intentional choices in my life. And it's out of that that the course basically got written. And I had no idea that I was setting something in motion that was going to ultimately lead to the demise of my marriage. But, there are lots of reasons for that. But that's what originally led to the creation of the course and then ultimately the book. And
And
then
one of
the second course is specifically speaking to divorced women. I can actually see my own path and journey of healing
yes.
through the things that I've created. So, yeah.
Right. I know it seems like so often whenever we're creating offers, it's for that version of us 5 to 10 years ago.
It's so true. It's so true. Yes. Well,
Yeah.
because I feel like everything, I always want to pay it forward. And I think therapists in general are like this, but I wish everybody was like this. If you go through something difficult and you've learned something valuable from it, use it to help other people when you're
Absolutely.
ready. When you're ready. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the value of coaching.
Yeah.
Like therapy, yes, you can make a lot of progress there, but with coaching, there's just a lot more opportunity as far as reaching people. But
Yeah.
on top of that, what I was going to share is like with coaching, you're able to speak from your experience more so because as therapists, you can't, it's kind of frowned upon to self-disclose.
Yeah.
But with the coaching, you've been there and like you know what it's like and you can connect on a
Yes.
different level.
Yes. And, I don't know that your listeners know the difference between therapy and coaching, but, you and I are both licensed therapists, which I think gives us a whole lot more credibility
Yes.
as coaches. But yeah, therapy comes from this medical model, and like your disease, you have a mental health disorder, and that's very much insurance driven. What I love about coaching is that coaching is very present and future oriented. It's really about showing up now and going, what do I want to change now? But the therapist in me knows how to understand how the past has affected you, and we might have to incorporate some of that into what we do. So
Mhm.
I really feel like I get to take the best of both worlds, having the therapist background, but having the coaching approach. Yeah.
Yes. And the other beautiful thing that I appreciate about coaching, and maybe you feel the same way, is that you can help someone fast track their results.
Yes.
Because, like, without a coach, I mean, you can stay stuck for a very long
Yeah.
time because you don't see your blind spots. And I also noticed this in the gym. Like, if the main trainer is not there, we don't push as hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
It's true. We get in those ruts, which is what,
Yes.
when I talk about the familiar path, there's so many ruts on that path that we've gotten ourselves into or we've been pushed into and we don't know how to climb out of. But change is scary. I mean, over and over and over when I work with people, I see this fear of, taking that new path because there's a bend in that path. We don't know what's coming. The familiar path, it's like the straight path ahead of us. We're like, okay, I don't like this path, but at least I know it, right? Whereas this one over here that promises a better life, it promises more contentment, it requires so much effort on my part to step onto it and to stay onto it. So yeah, there's a lot of fear, I think, that drives people to stay on this familiar path. So whether you're in the gym and you're like, oh, the trainer's going to push me beyond ways that I think I can handle, or the mental health trainer, which is what we are, the mental health
Yes.
trainer is going to challenge me to, think
Grow.
about things and do things and grow. Yeah, but
Yes.
it's going to stretch me and it's going to be a little painful. But yeah, that is how we grow.
Yes. Yeah. But we're typically very happy with the results once we've gotten through that growth
Yes.
phase or that
Yeah.
period of discomfort,
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Well, and that's key, what you just said right there, right? You have to go in when you decide to live a truly intentional life, you have to understand that you're going to go through a transition phase. And so I use the metaphor in my book of a bridge. You're crossing a bridge from one path to the next path, and that bridge is that state of transition because you are going to set some things into motion that you can't predict the outcome of. You don't know how the people around you are going to respond to your changes. They might resist those changes.
Right.
They might resent those changes. They might like the old you that was willing to people please and
And say
and
yes to everything and
say yes to everything and no boundaries and are really
hmm
permeable boundaries and now here you are stepping up and taking responsibility for yourself and saying, gently, lovingly, but saying no, you're going to get a little resistance from somebody. So yes,
right. Well,
yeah,
in one of your recent podcast episodes, I believe it was number 64, you were talking about the culture of convenience,
yeah.
which is so interesting. How do you think our culture of convenience kind of impacts these women that you work with? You know, the ones that wake up one day and realize that their life hasn't turned out the way they wanted.
Yeah, well, we want everything easy, right? And our brain doesn't have to want to work any harder than it has to. So,
Yeah,
it's always looking for patterns of behavior. And that serves us well with patterns that are good, but we have lots of patterns, habits that don't serve us well. And that can be challenging to break, even when you are trying to be intentional about it. It can be, like if you have a problem with snacking, it can be really hard to break that habit, even though you're not hungry. So we defer to what is easy and convenient. We defer to that path of least resistance. So when I talk on my podcast about marriage, about what's committed versus convenient, we're looking all the time for what's easy,
yeah,
and in my most recent one, which is one you're referring to, I'm talking about why marriage. why
yes,
why marriage for some people seems to be this obsolete institution. But is it really? And what does the research actually say? And okay, it might be convenient to move in with somebody to try that out for size, but in reality, you're leading yourself into a relationship that is going to be just as devastating if it ends. I mean, nobody ever
Wow.
shows
Good
up in
point.
this space with you or I and says, yeah, we lived together for 4 years, but now we decided it's over and it's okay, it's fine, it was no big deal. No, they're devastated.
Yes, they are. And I've worked with those women too who were
Yeah, they're
engaged and living
devastated.
together.
And after that amount of time, you are entwined emotionally, you're entwined financially. If there are children involved, that adds a whole
Oh,
nother layer
oh
to
my, oh
it.
my goodness, Debbie, but pets, that,
Pets,
yes.
I
Woo!
mean, we could speak to the right. So, what are you trying on for size? And how convenient is it to move into it with somebody and see if it's going to work out as opposed to making the commitment and the
Yes.
covenant before God and each other and family and friends that says, no matter what, we are going to make this work. There's no back door.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Wow. So fascinating. I never thought about it like that. When you live with someone, you're stepping into the same arena of potential pain.
absolutely you are. It's a myth to think that somehow you are not going to get hurt because you're trying something on for size because emotions are very much involved in that. And, we're stepping away from the main topic a little bit here when I
But
say this, but, we say, well, I want to make sure we're compatible, right? That's one of the reasons why we,
oh
we, we
yeah.
say that. But think about what you're really saying, okay? I want to make sure that we're compatible in how we live, and I want to make sure we're sexually compatible and all these things. Well, why not just hand over all the money in your bank account to this person that you don't know very well and say, I want you to go out and use this money to buy whatever you want. And I'm going to see how you spend that money so that, I can determine if we are financially compatible.
Oh,
How come nobody does that?
oh, they hold on
Right?
to their money tight.
Right. Okay. So if we're going to learn how to be compatible with each other, that takes time. That is a process of spending lots of time together and seeing each other in lots of situations. But we don't hand over our heart or our body. We don't move in with somebody all to determine whether there's compatibility. We move
Wow.
in when the compatibility has been established
Yes. Wow.
and
I
the
mean,
commitment has been made.
yeah. Such an interesting metaphor because yeah, all of us will hold on to that money tight, but then our time
Yeah.
or, even our
Our time,
furniture,
and yeah,
like,
all of that. Here, use it. And
yeah.
and the biggest thing that we give away, of course, is ourselves, our bodies,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, yes.
on the tiniest thread of connection.
Yes. Well, and so you've already spoken to this already in some of your sharing, but like you use your faith as an anchor for your work. Do you ever encounter a woman who doesn't have faith or like a religious background or any kind of
I
relationship with God?
do. Sure. And I'm not limited to people who are people of faith, but my value system doesn't change with the people that I work with. So when I talk with a woman, for example, if I have a woman who is looking to be in a committed long-term relationship, aka marriage, but she has a succession of men coming in and out of her life, I
Yeah.
challenge her to think about what she really wants and how whether or not what she's doing is really leading her to what she wants. And I talk about the damage that happens, for example, with casually giving yourself away. And I don't just mean sexually, I do mean time, energy, and even money. I've worked with plenty of women who are way too free with their money early on with a man. They let them move
Oh,
in rent free, or they help them
what?
pay things off. I mean, it's crazy the things that I've heard, but we're way too free with ourselves. So I talk with her about, like, what has that actually led to? And what would it be
Right.
like for you to raise the expectation of how a man treats you? Because the very lowest expectation now that a man has from a woman is that she'll sleep with him. He doesn't have to work at all for that these days. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be that a man had to show a woman that he cherished her for her to give him the time of day. But
Yeah.
now a man doesn't even need to take you out for dinner for, sex to occur. And so the most important thing that you have to offer yourself is given away, after what? A couple drinks or more at a bar and hey, we're off, whatever. And what does that lead to? And what's the emotional damage that happens to you? So I can say all of that without ever having to talk about God, and yet the premise is still there. The foundational
Yes.
core concepts are still there.
Yeah. And what do you think has changed, Debbie, in for women? Like, what is it about maybe the women who are out there dating today who, they are more freely giving their
Mhm.
time, energy, efforts into men than before?
Well, I mean, if we just get really blunt and say, they're giving their bodies away, what's happening is that women are still wanting the emotional connection, right? I mean, you
Yes.
can go out on and watch Facebook Reels or TikTok Reels, and they make jokes about this, right? The man is just, it's a hookup. The woman is still waiting for the guy to call. The woman is still waiting for there to be a heart connection. And while society tells us that women can separate themselves emotionally from sex, it's really not true. A
No.
woman who is able to do that has been very damaged by men, maybe even from childhood. I mean, that is an indication, as you well know, a woman who's able to do that is quite emotionally damaged. Most women are looking to connect with a man, and they're using sex as the way to get that connection.
It means,
So when they are used and discarded by multiple men, I mean, you can see the anger that women have for men. You can see that. And yet somehow that hasn't translated over to, I need to expect more from myself, and therefore I need to expect more from men.
yeah,
Instead, what I hear is fear. I hear women going, a man isn't even going to look twice at me if I'm not willing to sleep with him. But that is not true. The
no.
women that I have worked with who I have encouraged to actually withhold sex and put that in as a boundary have been shocked to see that is attracting the right kind of man.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, now that you're speaking to this, it kind of seems like, you were talking about the bridge earlier. I
Hmm.
wonder if these women feel like that having sex is the bridge to emotional connection, but it's
Yes.
actually in reverse. Like you really got to
Yes.
have the boundaries for yourself in order to create that emotional connection on
Someone
on
once
so
told
much of a
me,
deeper level, and then that
yes.
commitment too.
Yeah, someone once told me that their motto that they live by is, am I treating myself like a treasure or a target? And I thought that was a really
Oh,
like profound thing to say. This was many, many years ago, because women don't treat themselves as a treasure anymore. They don't. They've cheapened their
no.
own worth so much that they
Yeah.
are willing to freely give away the thing, since the dawn of time, the thing that men have craved from women initially is their sexuality. And we're just handing it out like it's worth
Yeah.
nothing.
And you
Yeah.
can't shortcut love.
You cannot. No, no.
Mm-mm.
So when a woman learns to value herself more, when she raises her own sense of self-worth and she sees herself through God's eyes, whether or not she realizes that that's what she's doing,
Mm-hmm.
then she raises the standard of what she allows in her life.
Mm.
She doesn't put up with or tolerate men who are wanting to cheapen her,
Yes.
who just see her as a sexual target that they're aiming for.
Right. And as you were saying earlier, like you're coaching them to think about what do you really want? And then it
Hmm.
sounds like you're kind of changing her mindset and beliefs, not only about herself, but like how can we get you what you want without sacrificing your body?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have them imagine putting that off the table, just taking it off the table. and
Hmm.
what would change in your relationship? And of course, you know, some of them are like terrified that they're going to be alone for the rest of their lives if they do that.
Yes.
And okay, some of those men may go away, but all that's really told us is they were the wrong men. They were never
Right.
going to commit in the first place.
Right.
You know
Exactly.
what's shocking to me? Here is
What?
the most shocking thing. Men are very direct about what they want. Man after man after man will tell a woman, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm just looking for casual. And she will still think that she is going to be the exception to the rule.
Hmm. Yes.
I mean, he's right there on the table. He's told her straight up, this is
There's your
all I want.
evidence.
Yeah,
There- Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, Debbie, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I think this was very insightful and enlightening. Where can the audience find you?
sure. They can go to my website, which is just debbiecaudle.com, and it's Caudle is how you spell Caudle. So yeah.
Okay. And you've got the High Ticket Woman podcast, and
Yeah.
it's on all major
It
listening
is, yeah.
platforms.
iTunes, Spotify, and all the obscure ones too. Don't even ask me to name them because I think those are the only two that really matter. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. And all of that's on the website. The book, access to the book, access, well, the courses are not, but if you're interested in the courses, you can just send me a message to the website. We have them sort of as hidden pages, you know, within the website so that I don't want people getting super distracted when they go to the website. So, but yeah, the podcast is there, the book is there, and how to reach me is there for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Debbie.
You're welcome, Erin. Thanks for having me. This was fun.